Welcome to another episode of the Snakes Are Us TV podcast, presented by Southeastern Reptile Rescue and its founder and director, me, Jason Clark.
Are you ready?
Well, hello. Thank you guys for joining me. My name is Jason Clark. This is episode number 25 of the Snakes Are Us TV podcast. And this episode is simply entitled Navigation. Navigation. Because most of these episodes don't really involve me trying to figure out what I'm going to talk about each week. Most of these episodes involve just things that I encounter throughout the week, and maybe I'll learn something new, or I'll decide, oh yeah, I don't know about this. Let me research this, or things that happen. And then I was like, oh, this actually, maybe I'll tell them this on the podcast. So that's kind of what this was. I don't even know what made me look up and start researching snakes and how they figure out where they're going. But that's what I want to talk about is navigation, how snakes and other animals too, because the more I've looked into this, the more I've learned. There's stuff, I didn't know that some animals could do, which is actually really, really cool. So if this is your first time joining us, we record this live every Thursday night at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on YouTube. And if you join us there, you can join in on the live chat function. And then whenever I get around to it, I take the audio and we upload those to all the streaming services. So you can listen as well as watch. So speaking of watching, I'm going to go to my YouTube channel now, pull it up, and go into live chat before we get into this tonight and see who all has joined us. Hopefully there's some people who have joined us. Hopefully it's not just me talking to myself. All righty. So, waiting for the live chat to come up now. As I started thinking about navigation and how snakes find where they're going from one place to the next, because it's pretty amazing that snakes are able to even do that. I started thinking back about the first GPS unit I ever bought. And I didn't realize, GPS has been out for decades, even way back before I bought a GPS unit. It was, used by the military. Then finally they made it available to the public, which is awesome. But the very first time I had heard of GPS and realized that it was something that I could purchase to navigate my way from point A to point B, it was not like the GPS units we have today, okay? This was a very rudimentary GPS unit, and it didn't, you couldn't put in an address, like a home address of somebody. It didn't have that capability. You basically would put in a city, like Atlanta to Savannah, okay? Atlanta to Miami, and it would tell you major highways and major roads to get there. It did not have secondary streets. It did not have business name. It had none of that. It was barely worth buying this thing. But when it came out, it was so cool and so amazing that I had to have it. And I wanted it for a very specific reason, not necessarily to get from point A to point B, because back then I used MapQuest. You remember MapQuest? If you don't know about MapQuest, okay, some of you know about MapQuest. I would go on my computer, I'd go to MapQuest, and I would type in the address I was going to start and where to go to, and then MapQuest would populate, detailed directions, and I would print this off and staple it together. It might be 5 or 6 pages worth of directions, and I would take that with me on my trip, especially if I'm going somewhere out of state. I don't know where I'm going, and yes, I know how to read a map. One thing I love are maps. I actually have different posters and things and different maps hanging on the walls in my other building. So I like maps. I know how to read a map, and a lot of times I will use a map to navigate with that way as well. But it just that first GPS unit I bought. Here's why I bought it. Still to this day, I like to go herping. I go snake hunting, and I'll go into places where I don't know where I'm at, and I'll be on some dirt roads in South Georgia that don't even have names. It's just a bunch of sand roads all connecting, and if you're not from there and you don't know where you're at, it's really easy to get lost, which I did many, many times. And so what I liked about this basic GPS unit that I had was it would leave a breadcrumb trail. So I would, and you know, you couldn't plug it up to your truck and charge it. It used 2 AA batteries. So if you're out there in the middle of nowhere and your batteries go dead, you better have somewhere with you or know how to get back to where you're going, one of the two. So I would use this GPS when I went to places like South Georgia, near Okefenokee Swamp, places like that, on these sand roads in the middle of nowhere. And I would go out road cruising for snakes in the daytime, nighttime, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, and had no clue where I was at. But I turned the GPS on, and I could leave a breadcrumb trail to figure out how in the world to get back to where I was at. So the problem with that GPS unit is it costs like $700, and $700 is a lot of money. Years ago, $700 was an enormous amount of money. So I ended up returning the GPS because I felt so guilty about spending that much money on this thing that I didn't have to have, but it was really cool. I didn't have to have it. I took it back. And then I missed it so much that I went back and bought it again. So that was my first GPS. But I ended up getting the little Garmin GPS units. Remember those? You would get those and had a little suction cup. You'd stick them on your window and plug it into your little power source in your vehicle. So I had tons of those, and those were so much better than that first GPS unit I had. But I'll never forget the first time I tried out a smartphone. I remember I was in the store, and they had these things. You could look at this smartphone and play with it and see what all it did. And I realized, oh, man, this thing has a built-in GPS, a global positioning system built in. That's amazing. And when I realized that it had like a satellite image view of the earth, and you could see houses and you could see water features and land and trees over here, and there's a sandy spot over there, and you could see all this. I was like, man, this is going to make finding snakes amazing. This is going to be so cool. That's why I decided to buy my first smartphone. That was the only reason. Because I had a cell phone before smartphones, a flip phone, which I was happy with, you know. But, man, when I found out I could use the GPS to do that, that's why I got a smartphone, okay? So we're talking about navigation and how snakes and other animals navigate to get from one point to the other. Let's go into the live chat here real quick. And thank you guys all for coming back and joining me. You know, every week when I do this, I'm always hoping, I'm like, I hope people show up and I'm not just talking to myself. And so I'm always so happy to click on here and see all your names pop up and all the familiar names that are here every single week. Thank y'all for coming and joining me. And I haven't bored you to death yet. episode number 25. So right now we have Cheesy Cheetah, first one in the chat. Thank you for being here. Again, Painted Rocks. Those two are always here. Chris Taylor, of course, is always here. Dennis Buckley is back again. Hello, Dennis. And let's see who else we've got here. Hang on a second. Can y'all hear me? Y'all can hear me, right? Somebody said there was no sound a while back. Yeah, but yeah, that's because I had my mic off earlier. But can you guys hear me right now? Let's see. I think you can hear me. Somebody put in the chat if you can hear me. Because I don't want to keep, okay, Connor Taylor says yes. Connor Taylor, I'm saying, okay, so I guess you're saying yes because you can hear me. Okay, good. All right, so back to where we were. Ben Baker is back. Thank you for joining us again, Ben. Lisa Easter. Now, Lisa Easter, have you been in here before? Have I read your name before? I'm trying to remember. If not, where are you from, Lisa Easter? Justice Jane. I don't remember seeing you in the chat before, Justice Jane, so thank you for being here. And please tell us where you are watching from. Cheesy Cheetah and Chris Taylor. All you guys are in here. Thank you guys for coming. Mary Ann H., thank you for being here. Tell us where you're from. Chocolate Cookies is back. And there's a bunch of people in here. So, okay, good. So, Rona Voss from North Alabama. Okay, thank you for being in here. So, anyway, that was my first GPS. And talking about animals and how they navigate and all this kind of stuff. I had to, speaking of GPS, sometimes it can be really aggravating. Last night, I was in a different vehicle last night, driving a long way, and my phone, I don't know, the phone kept connecting to the vehicle automatically, even when I turned the Bluetooth off, and it was a whole thing, and the GPS was all messed up last night, so that was really aggravating. But anyway, so one time, and this was back before I had a smartphone, before I had the world in my pocket, a GPS, you know. I'll never forget getting lost. And, you know, you do kind of forget what it's like to get lost. Now, in 2025, when you have, like I said, the world in your pocket, you got a supercomputer in your pocket. And, of course, some places you'll go, you know, there's no signal. Or, you know, it may not work, but most of the places you go here in the U.S., most of the places, you can get a, you know, signal for your GPS at least. But I remember this one time, I had spoken to a property owner. I'll never forget this. And his he had, I don't even know how many acres he had, hundreds of acres, lots and lots of land. And his property bordered this river. Okay. And I found it by looking on Google Earth on my computer because I didn't have a smartphone. They weren't out yet. So I was looking at, you know, Google Earth on my computer, and I was trying to find a place where I might have some luck going and looking for snakes. And I found this property, this bend in the river. There was some swampy areas, some hills. It was just a really snaky looking place, you know? And I was like, you know, I'd like to go there, but I don't want to trespass on somebody's property. So I then went to the tax records and figured out who owned it. And this sounds crazy, but this is something I've done many, many times and still do the same thing. I found out through the tax records who owned this piece of property. I found his name. I found where he lived. Okay. I drove to his house. I pulled up in his driveway. I knocked on his door. And he came to the door, and he was an elderly man in his mid-80s at least. And I said, hey, I'm Jason. I'm sure he thinks I'm an idiot, you know, guy standing on his porch. Hey, I'm Jason, and I love snakes. I work with snakes for a living, and I just happened to see on, you know, Google that your property, and it looks like a prime area for snakes and specific species I'm looking for. Can I go on your property and look for snakes? And he's like, yeah, sure. You can go there and you can look for snakes. That's perfectly fine. So he kind of told me where the gates were, and he's like, make sure you close the gate back because, you know, the cows will get out and all this. And when you go in, he said, you know what? I better show you because it's kind of confusing how to get back to the area that you're looking to go to. I said, okay, great. So he gets in his truck and I get in my truck. And I follow him out of his driveway down the road. Then we turn on a dirt road, go down the dirt road for a while, and finally come to a gate. And we open the gate, we drive through, and we're driving just across fields with no road, just open fields. And then we finally, he keeps making turns. I'm like, I don't know where we're going. But we get way back on the back of his property. And he says, okay, this will be the best place to start. And you have to get out on foot and go the rest from here. I said, okay, this is great. This is great. So I didn't have access to this property. So there were several different times I would go here to the property looking for snakes and looking around trying to scouting it out. And yeah, I did find snakes there. It was really cool. We actually filmed some stuff there. Um, but one day I was like, I've been out here hunting these snakes and looking for snakes. I want to come back now that it's summertime. I want to come back at night, and I'm going to go out here, and I'm going to walk to the back. I'm going to drive to the back of his property. I know how to get there. Then I'm going to get out of my truck, and I'm going to walk through the swamp at night. And I bet there's going to be cottonmouths everywhere, water snakes. I'm telling you what I'll see. It's going to be awesome. So I did that, and I parked my truck, and I've got my flashlight, and I've got my cell phone, which is a flip phone, and no GPS. This is before I'd ever owned a GPS. And I just start walking through the swamp and going like toward the river, And I don't know how long I walked. I don't know how far I walked. But by the time I realized I'm tired of walking and I'm ready to go back to my truck, I didn't know where that was because I was not walking in a straight line. I'm walking and there's like some deep water here because I'm like in a swamp. There's land and there's water and there's more land and more water. And so I'm walking like through shallow, 12 inches of water. Then there's like 6 feet of water over here. So I'm kind of moving and meandering through the swamp to make my way through it. And as I get further back there and realize I don't know where I'm at, I'm like, oh my gosh, I've got to get out of here. And I'm thinking, okay, well, if I find the river, I know there's a bridge that way, but man, that bridge, if I follow the river winds, that's 2 or 3 miles. And my truck is not 2 or 3 miles. My truck's a lot closer than that. So I started walking, and I'm so far out in the middle of nowhere, you can't hear like any highway or road noises. At least if there's a highway, I can say, okay, the interstate's kind of that way. I can hear that. You couldn't hear any of that stuff. And as I'm walking, I realize I barely have like 1 bar on my cell phone, hardly any signal. My cell phone's almost dead. I have like a little bit of battery left, not much. And then I realize my stupid flashlight is kind of getting dim. So I'm like, I better not use this a whole lot. I'll use it sparingly. Then I dropped my flashlight. I dropped it. And this stupid flashlight fell apart in pieces. The battery comes out, the lens comes off, the battery compartment, the holes the battery's in, it falls off. And I'm in the dark. And there's no LED light on my cell phone. I'm in the dark, in the swamp, in the middle of nowhere. There's no full moon, canopy of trees, and I have no idea where I'm at. I'm like, I'm going to spend the night like Shrek. I'm going to live in this swamp. This is going to be my swamp from now. So I get down, and all I can think of, this is perfect for water moccasins. Cottonmouths are out here, even though I haven't even seen one yet. And that even made it worse. I'm out here looking for snakes, and not only did I get lost, I haven't even seen a snake. So it was not a good night already. But I'm thinking, okay, my luck, as I'm feeling around in the dark for pieces of my flashlight, of course, I would probably put my hand on the cottonmouth, and now that I get snake bit, that would make it much worse. So luckily, it didn't happen. I got the pieces of the flashlight, I assembled it back together, and I never bought a flashlight like this again ever in my entire life. Anyway, and then it works, and I'm like, as I'm trying to figure out what to do, I make a decision, and by now, it's like, I don't know, 11 p.m., 11:30 p.m. It's not quite midnight, somewhere around there. And I decide the best thing for me to do, I've got a little bit of cell phone juice in my battery here, and I got 1 bar. It's going in and out. I'm going to try to call the old man that owns this property because there's nobody else I could call. There's nobody else I could tell where I'm at to even find their way back here to rescue me. So I'm sure this old man was regretting me ever walking up on his doorstep asking if I could have permission to prance around his property and get lost in his swamp. So I call him, and here's the bad part. And there's a bunch of bad parts. One of the bad parts was he was 85 years old, maybe older than that, really old, a very nice man, very nice man. But he couldn't hardly hear. He can't hardly hear. Even in person, you have to yell and talk really loud for him to hear you. And here I am on a cell phone waking him up at 11:30 at night. I'm like, hey, and he's like, what? And I'm having to yell in this phone, trying to get him to hear me, to hear what I'm saying. I'm screaming into the phone, and I'm telling him, I'm in your swamp. I'm lost. I'm in the swamp. Come find me. I don't know how to get out of here. My flashlight is falling apart. I don't know who to call, and I don't know where my truck is. I don't know where anything is. I don't even know where I'm at. And finally, I get him to hear what I'm saying, okay? And so he says, I'm going to come to you. I'm going to come find you. So I'm like, oh, thank God. Well, man, I don't even know how much time went by. 30, 45 minutes, an hour? So it was a long time. I'm like, this man done died, and he's not coming. No one's going to ever find me, and I'm going to spend the night out here, and I may live out here. So I wait and wait and wait, and I'm trying at this point not to just keep walking because I don't know if I'm walking the right direction or not. So finally, I hear. I mean, I barely heard it. I barely hear the faintest sound, which kind of sounds like somebody's blowing the horn on their car. And I'm like, even if it's not him, it's a road, because it's got a car on it. I'm going to go toward that sound. But it was not even close to the direction I thought where my truck was. I'm like, I think it's this way, but the sound's coming from over this way. I can barely hear it. And so I'm like, if I take time to walk around all these deep water pockets and stay on dry ground for the most part, it's going to take me a couple of hours to get to that sound or forever. So I'm just going to have to just walk in a straight line toward that sound, and whatever I come through, go through it and hope I don't drop my flashlight and it doesn't fall apart, which is what I did. And some of the places, the water was, most of it was over waist deep. Some of it was chest deep. And it was just all sticks and logs and swamp, which was fine if you can see and your flashlight isn't falling apart and you know where to go to help if you get hurt. Anyway, I finally get out, and the old man, he thought it was the funniest thing. He was laughing that I was lost in the swamp. But that was the last time I ever used that flashlight again. And it was the last time I went into a swamp without having a GPS or knowing where I was at. But, when I use my GPS, even having a GPS unit, I end up getting myself lost because I keep it on mute. I don't like the woman constantly telling me what to do. So I just mute it, and I just look at it. It's okay, I have a turn coming up, but then sometimes I'll forget to look at it. And I did this one time. I had the kids, and I was up camping with them in the mountains, and we were going to go to the store, and I'm on this road, and then I realized the store's a long way we're going, and I realized we had crossed the state. We're in a different state. We'd gone a long way, so I have to really watch. My daughter, Audrey, has a video. I didn't know she was videoing me. My daughter, Audrey, has a video of me in a parking lot. Anybody that rides with me, first of all, I'm a really good driver. Like really good, okay? The only thing I have a little bit of issue with sometimes is finding my way out of a parking lot, okay? Because when I'm in a parking lot, I think of, okay, if I had made this parking lot, I would have put an exit right over that way. And I'll go that way, and there's no exit. It's just like curbage and stuff, and I'm like, and we had gone to a reptile expo, me and my daughter, up in Atlanta, and we're in this big parking lot. And I go to get out of the parking lot, and it's a big parking lot, and there's no exit signs, there's no signs or anything. And we finally find the one exit that you go out of, and they had one exit sign about this big. I'm like, you think you'd have an exit sign that's comparable to the size of the parking lot so you can know how to get out of it. Anyway, so back to snakes, navigation, and how snakes find where they're going to be, okay? And before we do that, real quick, back to the chat here. A lot of people in here. We got Dennis Buckley, Central Wisconsin. Thank you for being here. We got Billy T all the way watching from Vancouver, British Columbia. Welcome, Billy T. David Leos is here. Thank y'all all for joining us. Now, so when it comes to, I remember why I was looking up snake navigation, because I was talking to somebody about relocating snakes. And this is the thing that comes up all the time, is when I catch a snake and I have to relocate that snake. And currently filming this, recording this episode, it is February 27th in Georgia, and the snake calls have already begun. I had to go remove a snake just the other night out of a lady's house. It was a snake inside the house. And I tried to tell her over the phone what it was and how to catch it herself, and she was not having any of that. She's like, you get to my house now, and you catch the snake and get it out, which I did. And my daughter, Audrey, decided to ride with me over there. So we went to a lady's house and caught it. And it was just a little Midland brown snake, only about 12 inches long, in the hallway. And the whole family absolutely terrified, like it was a king cobra in the house, except for their 5-year-old little boy that was in there. He was intrigued but scared of it. So before it was over with, he was holding it and playing with it, and had already named it. I don't remember what he named it, but he named it, and he loved it. Anyway, I took the snake with me and relocated it. And anyway, when we're talking about relocating snakes, some snakes do better being relocated than other ones do. And that's why I started kind of jumping into snake navigation and how they move from one point to the other, like how they know where they're at, because snakes do, most of them for the most part, some more than others, they know where they're at. Okay. For instance, one snake that has a huge area in which it lives here in Georgia is the eastern indigo snake. Eastern indigo snakes are a federally protected species. They're known as the emperor of the forest. They get, 8 feet long. They eat a lot of things. One thing they eat are other snakes, and they're just magnificent snakes. The eastern indigo, it's a non-venomous, wonderful snake, and they have a pretty large home range. One thing I was reading was talking about how the males typically males of most all snake species pretty much have a larger home range, an area in which they live, than females do. Some eastern indigo snakes have home ranges, the females of 50 acres, 100 acres, somewhere in there. But some of your males have been known to have home ranges of up to 1,200 acres, 1,200 acres or more. And these snakes have been known to travel long distances of, sometimes close to 15 miles, traveling from point A to point B. And so the problem with that is in South Georgia and North Florida, where a lot of these indigos live, is go there, even though it's a lot of rural areas, there's a lot of country there, a lot of wide open, spread out spaces, but trying to find a place that a snake can crawl even 2 or 3 miles without crossing several roadways, that's going to be really hard. So an indigo snake with a home range that big, that's traveling 5 miles or 10 miles or close to 15 miles, is crossing a lot of roadways. In the process, some people see snakes and think, okay, this is my chance to right the world. I get to kill a snake. Unfortunately, that's how some people think. And so road mortality, eastern indigo snakes, is difficult on them. But I started thinking, how do these snakes know where they're going? Or do they know where they're going? Or are they just out here crawling around dumb and hoping to find something? Okay. Well, turns out snakes know where they're going, and they actually have a pretty incredible memory. And this is hard for some people to wrap their mind around, especially those people who I had a guy who was watching one of our snakes. This happened recently, and he was watching one of our snakes drink water. I always say, anytime I watch a snake drink water, it always makes me thirsty. I don't know why, but he was watching the snake drink water, and what he said blew me away. He said, "Oh my gosh, they drank water?" I'm thinking, you didn't know snakes drink water? I was like, all animals drink water. That's what I said to him. All animals drink water. All living organisms need water to depend on. Plants, trees, animals, insects, everything needs water. He said, I've never even realized that snakes are animals. They are animals, aren't they? I'm like, yeah, yes, a snake is an animal. What do you think it is? Anyway, so some people are so far removed from even knowing that a snake is a living, breathing animal that has a heart, that circulates his blood, that has a liver, that has lungs, that has a brain, that has a memory. And so as I'm thinking about this, I'm thinking about the people who don't know snakes drink water and didn't realize the snake was an animal. Because this can't be the only guy that's ever thought that. There has to be a lot of people who don't know about snakes that have never thought about this. But snakes are much more complex than we think, and they have a pretty amazing memory. Now, when I started trying to look into snakes and how they figure out where they're going from point A to point B, there's a lot of things snakes use to do that. And one thing, of course, is their vision, their sight. And people always ask me, do snakes see the world the way we see the world? And the answer is no, not exactly. Most snakes don't have very great vision, okay? One thing that snakes see that hone in on a lot is movement. Okay. And if you ever see a snake with a live mouse or rat in the cage, if the mouse or rat freezes, fight or flight, and the mouse is totally terrified and just freezes and will not move a muscle, you'll see the snake kind of not know what to do. Like, I think there's a mouse here somewhere. And it may be 6 inches in front of his face. He can smell it, and maybe he can even see it, but he can't really tell what it is because it's not moving. And then if you clap your hands and it startles the mouse and the mouse moves, then the snake sees it and he'll grab it. That's one thing I've noticed over the years about snakes. So they see movement a lot, but they still don't see the world the way that we see the world. Our vision, unless you're colorblind, most of us see 3 colors. What are those 3 colors? Red, blue. What's the other one? Is it yellow? Is it red, blue, and yellow? Is that the 3 colors we see? I have no idea. Anyway, we see 3 colors, and that's all we see is those 3 colors. And then we see, if you mix those colors, we can see the colors that those 3 colors create. And that's all that the human eye can pick up. Well, snakes don't even really see that. The only colors that snakes see are blue and green. Blue and green. And they also see the colors that different intensities of blue and green can make up, okay? And then, like at nighttime, they're kind of like us, because at nighttime we can't see color either. Everything we see is black or gray, some form of it. And that's how snakes see at night. It's kind of the same way we see, except our vision is usually much better than a snake's vision. We see things a lot better than a snake can, but they do have vision. Okay. Now, so snakes will use vision, of course, to locate things. And one thing we tell people, and it's a speech that I give to people over and over and over and over again, especially here in central Georgia where I live, as we get calls from people who have snakes in their yard, they don't want it there. And the snake they usually want to get rid of here in central Georgia. We have rattlesnakes here too, but copperheads are pretty common where I live, and they want to get rid of copperheads. And the way I explain copperheads to people is this. Somebody will call me and say, hey, I got a snake in my yard, I got a copperhead out here, and I need you to come catch this copperhead. He's in the flower bed in front of my yard, in front of my house, and he's curled up next to this bush, and I can see him. He's sitting there, and if you come now, you can catch him, okay? Now, and of course I do that. We go all the time, and we remove copperheads from people's yards and relocate them. But one thing that I try to explain to these people is copperhead behavior. Because, in my opinion, me coming to your house and removing a copperhead out of the bushes doesn't really do anything. Now you think it does. If you don't like snakes, you think it does. But it doesn't really do anything. Let me explain what I mean. And this has to do with snakes and navigation, okay? With them knowing where they're at. So copperheads, specifically copperheads here in Georgia, your females typically have a home range of about 8 acres or so. Could be a little smaller, a little bigger. Males about 12 acres, because male snakes usually have a bigger home range. So on average, copperheads have a home range on average of about 10 acres, okay? And these snakes are not territorial in the sense that they guard their territory to keep other copperheads away. They don't really do that. So this copperhead range is about 10 acres, and this one's range is 10 acres, and they all just kind of overlap each other, And so if you got a copperhead in your yard today, as that snake travels from point A to point B and meanders through his territory throughout the active season, today you might have one copperhead, tomorrow you may have 5, and next week you may not have any. Now, how far will that copperhead move in a day, typically? Well, it all depends, but on average, from what I've read, 40, 50 feet, 60 feet, usually not much more than that, unless they're on a mission to go somewhere. They just kind of move from point A to point B and don't really travel really far, really fast, just going from hiding place to hiding place. So if I come remove that copperhead out of your yard, well, that snake's gone, but all the other snakes that occupy that same area will still be there. Because if you see a copperhead, 2 things have happened. 1, the snake made a mistake, and 2, you got lucky. Copperheads, timber rattlesnakes, eastern diamondback rattlesnakes, these pit vipers, one of their number one goals is to never be seen by you. And so they do a really good job of hiding. So most of the time when you're near a snake outside, most of the time you don't know that you're near it, and you never do. But sometimes you get lucky and see one because they made a mistake and they've exposed themselves. So this copperhead in your yard, he knows where you park your cars. He knows where your house is. He knows where the barn is in your backyard. He knows where your neighbor's swimming pool is. He knows where this clump of bushes are over here that's overgrown and has a good hiding place, and a bunch of boulders you've piled up there for him to go and hide under. He knows over here on the south-facing slope is a rocky outcrop. He can spend the winter there. So these snakes know where everything is. And this copperhead may live 20 years. And he may live in your neighborhood for 20 years. You say, well, I've lived here for 20 years. I've never seen a snake. Well, that's because they've done really good at you not seeing them. So when you finally see one, you think, oh man, snakes are showing up. No, they're not showing up. They've always been there. And they try not to ever let you see them. So when I take that copperhead now that has a home range of about 10 acres, I take that copperhead and I relocate him a mile away, 2 miles away. Will that copperhead do just fine and survive? There's a possibility he'll do fine and survive, but from what I've began to understand about snakes, most of the time they don't, because the copperhead wants to get back to where he knows where everything's at. And movement across great distances like that is a very dangerous thing for snakes to do. One of the most dangerous things a snake will ever do is move, because when the snake is on the move, his camouflage is not working as good as it normally does. And predators will see the snake, detect it, and eat the snake. So in most studies that have been conducted where you relocate a copperhead or a timber rattlesnake or a rat snake, most of those studies, those snakes do not survive, even if you're putting it in suitable habitat where there's other snakes like them that live there, okay? It's possible they can survive, but most of them don't. So, for instance, if you say, hey, I've got a barn, got some mice and rats out here. If you catch a king snake or rat snake in your barn 10 miles away from me, don't kill it. I'll come get it and turn it loose in my barn. People think that they're going to have this snake living in their barn now, and that's not snake behavior. That's not what they do, and it's not going to live in the barn even if that was its home range anyway. And so that doesn't really work, relocating snakes that way. So when I relocate one of those copperheads from your yard, if I'm not going to keep it in captivity and use it for education or give it to some other educator who wants to use that copperhead to teach people about copperheads, if I'm going to relocate it, guess what I have to do? If I want it to live, I have to turn it loose pretty close to where I caught it. Of course, out of your yard, but drive around the block and turn the thing loose, because if I go too far out of the way, well, I'm killing the snake. And people who don't like snakes are like, well, yeah, kill the snake. But, that's just not how snakes work. So anyway, let's go back to our chat here real quick. Painted Rock said, did I just hear you say you have a problem having a woman telling you where to go? Don't all men have that problem? Okay. Yes, I don't like the GPS telling me every little thing. Turn here, turn there, make it and especially when they don't pronounce whatever they're saying right. It just annoys me. So I have to mute it. GPS, Chris says GPS always says rerouting and turn at the next left. Yes. Let's see who else we got in here. I can't read all of these while we're recording. I do go back and read these. Okay. Barry Holt says, how far do snakes travel in a week or a month? Well, it all depends on the snake, Barry. Some snakes travel much further distances. Like I was saying, the Eastern Indigo snake, one record of it is, 12, 13, 14, 15 miles. It was going from point A to point B. We'll often see timber rattlesnakes, for instance. A male timber rattlesnake has a home range of about 1.5 square miles. And during the mating season, what we see is with timber rattlesnakes, the female appears to not have a whole lot of decisions going on as to, I have to go here, there. She just kind of meanders around the woods looking for food. She'll go this way and come back this way, and she's going back and forth, and she's looking for food to build up her fat reserves to get through the winter. Well, the male who's looking to breed with the female knows that as this female is going back and forth, meandering through the woods, she's releasing a pheromone. And that male has figured out the best way to find a female is not to just wander aimlessly around the woods, but it's to pick a direction. How the snake picks this direction, I have no idea. And I think it would be really cool if science figured this out. But the snake picks a direction and begins to go in that direction in pretty much a straight line. If it comes to an obstacle, something it can't crawl over or go through, it'll go around it. And when it goes around it, it gets pretty much back on the same line it was on and keeps going. And as it's going in the straight line, odds are eventually it's going to cross one of these trails of the snake that's going back and forth. And when it does, it picks up on that pheromone scent trail of that snake and follows it to the female and hopefully breeds with that female. So snakes can travel quite a ways. Okay. So a lot of people in chat, thank y'all for being in here. So now something else that's really cool about animals figuring out how to go from point A to point B is they think that snakes use several different things. One thing that snakes use is sight. We know that. We know they use sight. We also know that snakes use their heat sensing pits. They can detect temperature changes, things like that. And we know they use their tongue. When they flick their tongue, they're picking up particles, they're smelling those things, and that's giving them cues as to what's in the area. And so what they think is that snakes use a lot of things. They use a sense of smell, that this area may smell a certain way, and they can actually recognize different things in the landscape. This is what some scientists think, that snakes can visually recognize maybe this tree or this clump of trees or these rocks, or these boulders, and they visually see things. They put that together with the smell of the area and certain cues of scents and smells there. And some scientists believe that they can actually use the magnetism of the earth to navigate. And they believe that because there are so many other animals that we know use that magnetism. For instance, the earth's magnetic force affects a lot of things. And people will tell you that it affects people. So if you talk to a 911 dispatcher, oftentimes they'll tell you, yeah, it must be a full moon tonight. People are going crazy. Okay. So, does that actually affect people? I guess so. I mean, I don't know what it does, but but the earth has this magnetic field. We have the North Pole, the South Pole, which are moving, by the way. They move really slow. It's estimated that the North Pole has been, the North Pole is in Canada, and the North Pole has been very slowly moving to Russia. Then by slowly, I mean, it won't make it there in our lifetime. Okay. So it moves pretty slow, but, the Earth's magnetic field does change and does affect certain animals. Now, one animal that uses magnetism, because we believe snakes do this, is the fox. And I was like, man, the fox uses magnetism? And basically what they do, they have some type of, they have a couple things. One thing they have is in the fox's eyes, they have these things that are like photopigments. And this basically helps them see a magnetic field. And because it's in their eye, they can also visually see the trees and their prey. But it's thought, how do scientists ever know anything? This is what some scientists said. Is this true? I have no idea. Okay, but they think that fox can actually see a magnetic field, and that magnetic field is also overlaid with the vision that they see, like kind of like we do. And that helps them to locate their prey and hone in on it and catch it. I mean, if that's true, that's pretty amazing. But there's no telling. There's no telling what some animals can do, because, there's a lot of animals that use that. You think about birds, animals that migrate from point A to point B. Imagine birds that travel thousands of miles every year back and forth. They know where they're going. Are they just simply looking at things they can see, landmarks? Well, no, because some of these birds travel at night. I've seen geese flying over my house at nighttime. I've heard them. I'm like, why are these geese flying at nighttime? How do they see anything? So I think instead of just visual cues, they're using the Earth's magnetic field. And we know this to be true because of pigeons. Pigeons, think about homing pigeons and how you turn the pigeon loose, and they used them in the war they would tie messages to a pigeon, and they would send the pigeon off, and the pigeon knew where to go home to. He's a homing pigeon. That's what they call homing pigeons. They would go right back to it. And what happens is they found out that pigeons have a small little spot on their beak. And this small spot on their beak contains magnetite, which is basically like a little piece of magnetized rock. And it's in a little speck on the pigeon's nose, a magnet. And they believe that other animals may have, like dolphins, for instance, they believe that dolphins may possibly have some type of magnets or something, not huge magnets, but some type of a mineral that's magnetized in the dolphin's brain or somewhere in the dolphin's head, because they'll do studies where they'll drop down like a barrel full of magnets, and the dolphins make a beeline to it. Then they drop down other barrels that don't have magnets, and the dolphins could care less about it. So there's something going on where dolphins can detect magnetic fields. And, we know that bats do it. We know all different types of birds do it. We know that fox do it. And so if all these different animals can do that, wouldn't it make sense that snakes to be able to do it? Especially, I'm 6'5". I'm tall. I'm 6'5". I can walk in the woods and I can look around and I can see things, and I still get lost. Imagine laying on your belly and your eyes are an inch off the ground, and all you see basically are the dead leaves in front of you. There ain't a whole lot you can see down here. So I'm assuming they're using their vision to see something, but most of what they're following has to be cues that are coming in through different smells that they're picking up scent. And it has to be some type of a magnetic thing where they're honing in on the Earth's magnetic field. Now, sometimes have you ever felt, let me ask you this, have you ever felt where you're driving down a road somewhere and you feel like, okay, I'm going the right way. I feel like I'm going the right way. Like I'm driving north and north feels like this way. You ever done that? Like you can feel it, and then you realize you're not going the right way. You're going the wrong way. Because there's so many times where I'm like, I think I can feel the sense of direction. I have the Earth's magnetic field in me, and I'm like, I'm in sync with it. I can feel it. Then I look at that little SE up there. It says southeast. So that's the direction I'm heading. I said, well, why am I heading southeast? It feels like I'm going north. Anyway, so I don't think I have a very good sense of direction. Now, if I'm out in the woods somewhere, if I really pay attention, I can usually find my way back. But I have definitely gotten to the point to where when I'm parking, going to be walking through the woods a long way, I do make sure, okay, do I have a cell phone signal here? Let me mark my vehicle where it is on my GPS, just in case I need to find my way to get back to it. So anyway, there's so many animals that have absolutely amazing abilities to navigate and find their way from one point to the other point. And a lot of the ways that these animals do that, we don't understand that yet. As our technology increases more and more and more, we are learning so many new things because, these snake books behind me, the more you read these snake books, the more you realize how much you don't know about snakes. That there's so much that, not just snakes, just animals in general. There's so much that we don't know about so many different kinds of animals. It's amazing. And when you think about like dolphins, they said they have something in their brain or the front of their head that can detect, magnetic fields. Then it makes you wonder, well, maybe is that why whales beach themselves? Because sometimes the magnetic field can slightly change, or maybe it changes more than we know, more than we can pick up on to measure it. And so you'll have whales that, for no reason that makes sense to us, go the wrong way and beach themselves and get up in shallow water and they just die. Well, they're not trying to kill themselves, apparently, I wouldn't think. So it seems like they should have had a GPS, okay? But it was not working, okay? So I'm guessing that there's a lot more creatures that have that sense of direction tied to the Earth's magnetic fields than we know. But I do know one thing. I ain't one of them, okay? I always think I can feel that it's that way. It feels like it's that way. That's the way to get back to my truck. I feel it, and I walk that way, and it's not even that way. So, but talking about navigation and direction and all these things, because like I said, I wasn't looking all this up to even do this on the podcast. This is just stuff I was just interested in reading about this week. And it got me to thinking about other things. It got me to thinking about how when you're navigating, not just going to the grocery store, but you're trying to navigate your life, and figuring out where you want to be. My daughters are juniors and seniors in high school, and they're both talking about jobs and what they want to do. And, my senior is kind of panicking a little bit because she's not sure what she wants to do. I'm saying, you got time. Slow down. You don't have to know everything about your life today, about what you're going to do for the rest of your life. You've got time to figure this out. But that really stresses a lot of people out. And, when you're trying to navigate your life, one thing that I've figured out is most people try to figure out, they come up with a plan and they say, okay, I want to figure out where I want to be, which is a good thing. You want to make a plan. You want to try to, make a plan of where you see yourself in the future. But what people don't do a lot of the times that I see is they don't, instead of just, most of them look as to where they want to be, but most of those people don't figure out where they are now, which is kind of an important thing, okay? Because knowing where you're currently at in life is a big part of knowing how to get where you want to go, okay? And so figuring out where you are now is really important. But so many people, as they're going through life and they're saying, okay, well, here's what I'm going to accomplish this goal. Here's this goal right here that I want to accomplish. And I'm going to get to that in a year or 3 years or 5 years or whatever it is. And as you're going toward that goal, life happens. Bad things happen. Things pop up. Things get in your way. Things make you stop. And the only way to get around it, you have to detour. You have to take a detour around it, And that stops a lot of people. Actually, it stops most people. Most people will stop going to that goal because they've come to a fork in the road, a detour they did not anticipate being here. And what I figured out is you can't let that stop you. You got to keep on going. For instance, today and yesterday, man, I've had 2 rough days. Goodness gracious. You ever heard the saying, when it rains, it pours? Every single thing that can go wrong seems to make everything else go wrong. So, for instance, as soon as I finish recording this podcast, I'm getting in the truck and I'm going to make a 3-hour plus drive with about 40 snakes. That's what I'm doing as soon as I finish recording this. They're already packed up. I'm going to the Wiggum Rattlesnake Roundup. Now, it's a reformed roundup. They don't kill snakes. It's actually a rattlesnake festival, but it's still called the Wiggum Rattlesnake Roundup. And there's going to be other organizations there, wonderful organizations, conservation organizations that promote how wonderful rattlesnakes are. They're not taking rattlesnakes from the wild. They're not killing them and eating them and skinning them. They're not doing any of this stuff. These are all captive rattlesnakes from educational organizations bringing them in. And so I have a 28-foot trailer. It has a fold-down stage on the side. That's already there and set up. I took it yesterday. And today I'm taking our 32-foot trailer. It's a walk-through reptile exhibit. And we've got, all kinds of rattlesnakes, plus a bunch of other snakes in there that we're taking. And then I'll be on stage Saturday, March 1st, doing 3 shows on stage. There'll be other people using our stage to do other shows with other snakes. So Wiggum Rattlesnake Roundup, a wonderful event, really cool event. Now that they've changed it, and I definitely recommend you go. Here's my problem. Here's what happened. I've got a truck that I use to pull these big trailers. These are big trailers, and I don't ever drive that truck other than to pull these trailers. And every now and then I'll go crank the truck up, let it run, so it's not just sitting for months on end. I try to crank it up. Well, I went to go crank it up the other day to get ready to deliver one of the trailers down to Wiggum. And the truck wouldn't crank. I'm like, oh, of course, the battery's dead. So I plug my battery charger up, and what happens? It starts smoking. I'm like, oh, I don't want to catch it on fire, so I unplug it. I'm like, I guess I need to go buy me a new battery charger. I said, before I charge this battery for 10 or 12, 18 hours, let me take the battery to the auto parts store and make sure the battery is good. I take the battery with me, and the battery checks out. The battery's good. It's just dead. So I buy a battery charger. I come back. I hook it up. It charges all night long. I come back. The battery is charged. The truck still won't crank. And I did get it cranked a couple hours later eventually, and then there was another issue with the truck. And then it dawned on me, I can't use this truck to deliver this trailer today like I'm supposed to do. What am I going to do? I have to have both of these trailers at this event. I have to. I don't have a truck. And, when that happens, it's pretty devastating because you've got where you have to go, and then a detour happens, and it's a long, expensive detour, very expensive detour. And so I'm trying to figure out, I don't have time to get the truck towed to the shop and then wait a week or two for them to fix the truck or whatever it's going to take. I've got to deliver this one trailer today so I can decide, do I give up? Is this the end? Do I quit? No, I had to go rent a truck. And you can't just like you go rent a car. It's pretty easy to rent a car. And you can even rent a truck, but you got to rent a truck that's big enough to pull this trailer. So had to go rent a truck, get it back, hook it up, and then drive and deliver this trailer. And I didn't even get to the place of where the Rattlesnake Festival is until 10 o'clock last night. That's what time I got there. And I had to get it parked, get it in position, get it all kind of halfway set up, and drive 3.5 hours home. So I did that. And then today because dealing with the truck being broke down and having to go find a truck to rent a truck, that took a lot of time that I really didn't have. And so I had to get up early this morning, and I have been working non-stop all day today, non-stop. Because the other problem I had, the reptile exhibit trailer, the big walk-through snake trailer where you see all the snakes in the exhibit. Well, it's got 20 cages in it. It's got 20 enclosures. It's got an alligator tank that holds water, and then 19 enclosures that you put snakes in. Well, one whole side of this trailer, the lights quit working. Just stopped working. Now, if you're an electrician, you're like, oh, not a big deal. I'm not an electrician, okay? So I'm like, I got to wrap my brain around this. I got to figure out, not only do I have to figure out why it's not working, I got to fix it. And I don't have time to even find somebody to fix it. It's got to be done now. And so I spent hours today figuring out why the electricity doesn't work. And I found out, and I fixed the problem myself, got it working, and I even had to install a new light in one of the enclosures, and so got all that done. I was like, oh, thank God, got that done. And then I was like, oh, man, the podcast, I've got to record this thing live 8 o'clock. It's 6 o'clock. So I've only got 2 hours to do this. And I'm filthy dirty. I'm pouring sweat. It's hot, and I've been working, and I still have to load the snake trailer. I've got to put all the equipment in it, not to mention all the snakes. So then I have to go into the snake building, and I've got a list of all the different species that I've got to have, how many of each species I have to have. And I spend next time going through there just before I started this podcast, loading up all these snakes. I don't even know how many I loaded, a bunch of them. Got them all loaded. And then I've been working all day, so I finally got to go take a shower and come in here and sit down in this podcast with you guys. And it's like I said, as soon as this is over, I'm hitting the road and I got to go. And then I'll spend all day tomorrow setting up the reptile exhibit and setting up our stage and getting the audio equipment, all the speakers set up and getting everything ready to go. Because Saturday, there's going to be thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of people showing up to watch me on stage and other educators that are coming out on stage and to see all the snakes. So we have to have it ready. So I was thrown a curveball. I had a detour pop up, and it was an expensive detour, a detour that took a lot longer than I wanted to take. But you can't let any of that stuff stop you, because those detours, all that stuff that happens, that's life. That's called life. And no matter who you are, no matter how put together your life is, no matter how much money you've got, you're always going to have detours and problems and issues and situations that you have to face, and you have to keep going through. And if you keep going through and you keep pushing and you don't let it stop you, eventually you'll get to where you need to be. And I'm not even talking to y'all at this point. I'm talking to myself, telling myself this, so I will keep going and keep doing this, because it is, it can be hard. It can be really hard running an organization like this and having so much to do and so little time to do it, that it gets overwhelming at some points. But I did it, and I'm packed up, and I'm ready to go. And as soon as I turn this podcast off, I'm hitting the road. So I want you guys to come see me. I'm going to be at the Wiggum Rattlesnake Roundup Festival Saturday, March 1st. And then the very next weekend, I'm going to be at the Claxton Rattlesnake and Wildlife Festival. And now that one's a Saturday and Sunday. That's a 2-day event. And I'll be doing snake shows on stage each day. There'll be a lot of other conservation educational organizations there as well. They'll have snakes there. They usually have an indigo snake at both of these events. You want to come see a live indigo snake? They usually have them there. It's pretty cool. So if you want to go to one of my live events, go to SnakesAreUs.com, click on my schedule, my calendar there, and you'll see where I'm going to be the whole year. And also, we still have our T-shirts. These are our Snakes Are Us TV logo on the front, our Southeastern Reptile Rescue logo on the back, and these are available on our website, SnakesAreUs.com. We have the Southeastern Reptile Rescue hats, really cool hats, and so these are available. And that goes to support us and what we're doing. So, guys, I really appreciate y'all joining me here for episode number 25 of the Snakes Are Us TV podcast. I'll plan to be back next week. I'm sure before next week, I will have some more detours. There will be more problems that pop up. There will be more issues that I have to face. And it's the same thing with y'all. Y'all going to have the same thing. But whatever happens, whatever situation comes your way, especially when it's a situation that's overwhelming and you think, how am I going to get through this? This is the worst situation I've ever faced. I've never faced anything as bad as this. Because that's happened several times in my life where a horrible thing I've faced has come up. And in those situations when I do that, I always stop and I look back over my life and I think about all of the horrible situations, other horrible situations I've been through. And I think about how God got me through every single one of them. And at the time, I did not know what that was going to look like. But looking back, he did it. And then I remind myself that even though this situation might be bad, this is not where God walks away from me. This is not where he leaves me sitting here. I don't know how I'm going to do it, but God's going to lead me through this situation too. So anyway, guys, thank y'all so much for joining us. I'm Jason Clark, episode number 25 of the Snakes Are Us TV podcast. Until I see you guys next week, be good. And remember one thing. Jesus loves you, and so do I. You guys have a good night.